You're listening to Girls with Grafts, a burn community podcast created by Phoenix Society for Burn Survivors, a leading nonprofit dedicated to supporting the burn community. In this podcast, we'll talk with burn survivors, share resources to help with supporting and improving burn recovery, and discuss how to prevent burn injuries. Here are your hosts, burn survivors and Phoenix Society's marketing team, Amber Wilcox and Rachel Kudlak.
Hello and welcome back to Girls with Grafts. I am Rachel Kudlak. I'm one of the hosts of the podcast, and I'm joined today by my lovely co-host, Amber Wilcox.
Well, hello there. I hope that everyone is having a wonderful day today and really excited about today's guest. I've followed her for quite some time on Instagram, or as my husband calls it, the gram. And super excited to introduce her. But before we do, Rachel, I'll let you do our important intros here before we can get started in chatting.
Yes, so I want to first thank today's partner who is powering today's podcast, which is Exerco Medical. Exerco engineers high-precision products for both the healthcare and tissue bank professionals and are dedicated to advancing the healing power of skin to patients who need it most. So you can learn more about Exerco by visiting their website at exerco.com. And yes, I'm also super excited to have on our guest today, who is Medley Zeigler Bokun. Medley graduated from nursing school at Southeastern Louisiana University at the end of 2017 and immediately began her career at a women's hospital in Baton Rouge. She was working as a med-surg and oncology nurse. In June of 2019, she married her wonderful husband, who at the time was a third-year medical student. Just 3 short weeks after their wedding, they were in a gas explosion in their home. It was nearly fatal for the both of them, but Medley especially sustained second, but mostly third-degree burns across 96% of her body. The chance of survival was not high, but God had other plans. Now Medley and her husband Kevin feel that God has called them from a place of medical ministry to a ministry that's focused on spiritual and emotional healing. Medley and her husband now travel and speak at conferences, churches, and social gatherings, sharing their story of survival. And most recently, in February 2024, they welcomed their first baby into the world, a sweet baby boy named Levi. But thanks, Medley, so much for joining us today. We're happy to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Let's start over again. And I know Rachel read a little bit about your bio to start. But would you mind telling us a little bit more about your burn injury? And you said somewhere in the middle, right, of that story, not too long, but enough information where we can learn a little bit more about your injury.
Absolutely. So my husband and I were in a house fire, basically, in 2019. We had just gotten married. We'd been married for 3 short weeks. And I had moved to North Louisiana where he was in medical school, and we were renting a house, and the gas had been turned on that day, and there was an uncapped gas line that lots of people didn't catch. And so when there was a spark, the whole house just blew up. And so my husband and I were both burned. We were both burned differently. We were at different parts of the house. My husband was much closer to a door, so he was able to get outside a lot faster than me, which when it comes down to it, mere seconds matter. We all know that. So I obviously wound up being a lot more burned than he was, but we got into the backyard and things just kind of, went from there. But yeah, that's the short version of what happened and how it happened.
Yeah, and I guess what were like the next steps like for you? I mean, especially being so early on in your marriage, being a medical student is already tough enough, let alone going through a major burn injury. So what was, how long were you in the hospital for, and kind of how did you just manage, like I said, being so new in your marriage and at such a pivotal point in your life, and then going through such a major event?
Well, not to sugarcoat it, it was terrible. It was absolutely horrible. Um, I was actually a nurse. And so I had been working for about a year and a half before we got married. And so I was a nurse. I was very familiar with the medical community and hospitals and um, all that stuff. And then, he was over halfway through medical school. So we were just the medical, little couple dynamic duo ready to take on the world, and do all the things. So it was really crazy because I had moved away from my family and I was very, very close to my family. So I was already having a hard time with that. And I was looking for a job because we had, hadn't been there for long. And so the moments after were just crazy. Like I remember with my medical knowledge, I'm lying in the backyard because I run out of the house. I couldn't even stand up. I just am like laying in the ground. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I'm dying. Like, this is it. And I wasn't really scared. I honestly felt so much peace in that moment. But in my medical mind, I was thinking to myself as I lay there, if the paramedics don't get here ASAP, I'm not going to make it. Like and I didn't even look at like my body. I just closed my eyes and I laid down. And it's kind of miraculous how everything happened and everything happened really quickly and all the pieces fell into place how they were supposed to. So they got me to a hospital really quickly, actually. And thank goodness, because by the time I got there, my body temperature was already like 94 degrees and I was declining rapidly. So, fast forward, I was in the hospital for just shy of 6 months. I did
Wow.
3 months in an ICU burn unit. And then I did about a week and a half in like their step down unit. And then the rest of the time, I was transferred from the hospital to like a inpatient rehab facility, kind of like an LTAC long-term place. And I was there for the rest of the time. And
Were
so
you in a coma,
everything,
if you don't mind me asking? Were you in a coma for any amount of that time?
yes, I was.
Yeah.
I was medically induced a coma for about a week and a half, 2 weeks. It's kind of fuzzy on exactly
Sure.
when I like woke up and started remembering things, but we guesstimate it was about a week and a half, 2 weeks. And it was, pretty touch and go there at the beginning. Obviously, I don't remember that, but my family
Right.
does. And Kevin was also burned. They were really never fearful for his life, but it was serious because he was a 35% burn, second and third degree. So he had several surgeries too, and he was in the ICU for about a week, and total his hospital stay was about a month or 6 weeks. Um, and of course, he honestly had a lot of emotional things that he went through because he was burned and he went through all of that too, but he also carried all this survivor's guilt with him
Mm.
because I was so much worse off and things for me were so touch and go. And so it
Mm.
was very traumatic for both of us, kind of in different ways. Our journeys were
Mhm.
different.
Yeah.
But it was very, very tough. Um, you know, we had never lived together. So we had been dating for, several years, but we had never lived together and certainly never, it was the brand new. It was the new beginning. It was
Right.
all the things. And so 3 weeks is not enough time to even get in a routine, because part of that was our
Right.
honeymoon and, we had come back and Kevin had to dive back into school. And so we weren't even in a routine yet. So
Right.
it was very challenging. It was a very, very challenging time for sure.
I
Um,
can only imagine. And remind me of the year. So how long ago was this? Just so I have
it
a better
was
understanding.
July of 2019.
Okay.
So we're a little over
So
5 years.
right. So now you've been together for some time now, but I'm sure it was also right before COVID, right? So
Yes.
you were, and as I was a COVID survivor as well. So like that's a scary time for all of us to begin with. Never mind add
Right.
in being burned.
Absolutely.
I can only imagine what that was like for the two of you. And then you get out of the hospital, right? 6 months, I think, for an injury of your size, from what I've understood, is a remarkable, right, time.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. Sometimes I think we kind of look back on that and we're like, they sent me home. Like, what?
Yes. And
Because
what was that like going home? Because I can only, so you had family that came to support, or was it just you and Kevin during
oh,
that time?
absolutely. No, we were literally surrounded
That's
by
wonderful.
a village. Like that is honestly what got us through. Obviously, we're very faith based. So our faith is definitely something that we clung to, but our faith and our family and our friends, I mean, that's how we got through. My family was there, his family was there, and my mom and my youngest sister, they basically lived in Shreveport with us for those 6 months. I mean, my mom
Wow.
never went home, like never. My dad had to go home, my other sister had to go home, but they would come back and forth every weekend. I mean, it was. And Kevin's family was there for as long as amount of time as they could be there. We had friends literally from all over the country that showed up, and family members. And I mean, my hospital room was like a rotating visitor center, and I would not have had it any other way. You know, a lot of people, when they go through that, like they don't want to see people. They don't, your whole world has changed. But for me, having that support and having those people there, I wanted anybody and everybody to come, because anything, to try to distract you and take your mind off the pain, because I mean, that's all I was living, is just the intense and horrible pain. For those that don't know, I was a 96% burn, second and third degree. So, and I was tied down to the bed every way possible. I couldn't move. So it was a rough time, but, going home was honestly terrifying. When you're hospitalized for those long periods of time, you start to think like, I guess this is my life now. Like, I'm never going to have a life outside of this hospital, never going to have a life outside of this room, this building. And you can't really imagine what it's like to be outside again. But then when we were faced with, me actually going home, that was terrifying in a whole new
Absolutely
way, because I had 24-hour medical care for almost 6 months. And to think about making that transition to go home and not have that support, I was so scared. I mean, I was ready to get out because it feels like prison, but I was really scared to leave that support. And the other thing is that we were actually coming back to South Louisiana, because the only option we had at the time really was to move in with my parents, because my care was so demanding and so high. That's why I say, to this day, sometimes I think about the way that they sent me home and I'm like, that's insane. I mean, it's absolutely insane. I didn't go home with home health. I mean, looking back on it, it was just crazy. But so not only was I being discharged, but we had to make a 5-hour trip back to South Louisiana. And so totally leaving that medical support community that we had built there for 6 months, And so it was really scary, and it was a huge adjustment. And about 4 months after that is when COVID hit. So
then you had a whole nother round of adjustments. You had to go.
Yes.
I can only imagine. I know my burn was just the 20%, and that was a lot for us to handle. So 96% is a lot to take on, and not having that at home health. I thought, right, I needed that. But I will tell you, if it makes you feel any better, it wasn't a huge support system for me. So my husband and I did it on our own, but I'm so glad to hear that you had family to support you during that time, because it is a very scary time for everyone. So
and the burn community obviously understands, but a lot of times when I'm talking about this, it's kind of hard to articulate to people. Just because you go home from the hospital, that is definitely not the end of the journey. It actually is just the next phase.
Yep.
And being a 96%, my wound care was still top to bottom. I mean, my whole body was still open sores, open wounds at that time. And my precious husband and my sweet mother and my 2 younger sisters, honestly, the 4 of them, they did everything. They did all the dressing changes. They did, and it was so bad. I mean, y'all know, if you've been there, but
we do.
Especially those first couple of months. I mean, it would be 4 hours in the bathroom with 4 people.
Yeah.
My husband, my mom,
not to that degree. I don't have that degree, but we would spend, I actually just said this in another podcast, where we would spend hours, right? Like, it wouldn't just be, and again, I was 20%, but it was just my husband and we didn't have family close. And he would spend, I think, anywhere from 2 to 3 hours a night doing the dressing changes. And it was just him, right? So it's a little bit different, but it's exhausting, right? And it is so much work to get the wounds, washed, and you're terrified of getting in the shower. I'm sure you can, I think that my brain has chosen to block a lot of that out, but
mine too.
Cry and cry and cry. And then we would go to, transition to a room where I could lay down and get the dressings changed. But that was twice a day. I don't know about you, but like, that was that alone took up most of my day. Right.
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
That's exhausting in and of itself. And then you're like, okay, what am I supposed to eat during all of this? Because I'm just so tired and ready to, and your body is doing this rapid healing and through all of it.
Right. And when I came home, I know everybody's journey is different, but when I came home, I was in a wheelchair. I couldn't feed myself. I couldn't take myself to the bathroom. I had to have help with every position change, because I have partial amputations on all 10 of my fingers. And so that was probably one of the biggest setbacks,
learning how to use your hands,
one of the biggest hurdles to learn and overcome. And so the wounds on my hands and all that stuff was still so fresh. I mean, I couldn't feed. I literally couldn't do anything. And so you really do block a lot of it out, because it's just so heavy and so hard. And my husband and I talk about this all the time. And we're like, the farther that we get away from it, it's like we look back at that time and you're like, did that actually happen? Or did I imagine that? Like, that seems so awful. Like, did we just imagine that? But that it actually happened. But I think that's, the body's trauma response is to kind of like disassociate and disengage from that a little bit. To, give yourself some grace. Like, did that actually happen?
Definitely.
And I think I look back at that time, Medley, and go, okay, if I got through that, or we got through that as a couple, like, right. Like, my husband wasn't burned, but, it was, early on in our marriage as well. And so if I could do that, okay, like, I can have a child, right? I can do anything else, right? Looking back at that, the two of us are like, well, we can do this. And I've had some other things, that have come up over the years, and we've just like, you've done many things and a lot of things that were much harder than that, right? Like, you can get through whatever this next hurdle is because you were able to get through that.
For sure. And, you get into a pattern of life, and it's easy to get, caught up in the stress and the daily overwhelm of, job and relationships and, motherhood now. And, some days we're just human, we get really overwhelmed and our emotions catch up with us. But, in those moments, it is good. And sometimes, Kevin and I will remind each other, we're like, we can do this. We can do hard. We've been through harder stuff.
We can do hard things.
Like we can do hard things, really hard things.
You can ask Rachel. That's like we talked about this on our, opening episode, and I can do hard things. That is like our mantra is, and it is true, right? If you can get through this, you can get through other things for sure.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. Yeah. It did not stop me from being absolutely terrified to have a child, but it was more
absolutely not. It doesn't stop.
Yeah. Oh no, it was more from the aspect of like, can I trust my body to do this?
Mm-hmm.
Like my
especially
body
with a burn injury.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That was the aspect. If I hadn't been burned, I think I would have been afraid, but I don't feel like I would have been terrified. But I was legitimately terrified. Like, I don't know, can my skin handle this? Can my grafts handle this? Can I handle the itching? What about the neuropathy in my feet? Like, it's all the things. I'm like, I don't know if my body can physically do this. But I did, and he's here, and I wouldn't change a thing.
And he's 6 months old. You told us, which is absolutely so my son is turning a year tomorrow. And I know we're going to air this episode not during that, but he's turning a year tomorrow. And let me tell you, yes, 6 months. It seems just like yesterday, right? That people tell you like, oh, don't, I blinked and he grew up, and don't blink. And I'm sure you feel the same.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We did.
But having a son is absolutely crazy. And yeah, some days I'm like, oh my gosh, I know you just mentioned to us before the podcast that he was not feeling well. I will all spare the details for everyone on the show, right? But I've had that, similar of like, oh my gosh, like now what, right? And just new things happen, and you just kind of have to adapt and deal with it.
Yeah. And I think another part for me, while we're on the topic of motherhood, that I have been so concerned and worried about, especially, when I was pregnant, is like, having the 10 partial amputations on my hands, that has changed life for me significantly. As anyone with any kind of amputation out in that community knows, it is a whole different world, and one that you feel totally ill-equipped to conquer and take on. And I know there are people out there that have lost way more than me. And so I am not at all trying to complain. My doctors and my team, they saved every piece of my fingers that they could, and they did their best. And I am so thankful for what they were able to save and their wisdom in knowing how to navigate that. And I actually saw today that today is the 5th anniversary of the day that I had the major surgery on my hands. I didn't really think about that before this podcast, but back to motherhood, just being afraid, like, oh my God, can I take care of my son can I do this by myself? Because I can't have somebody around 24/7. And like, I struggle to put on my own shoes. Like, can I seriously take care of an infant, of a newborn, of a toddler by myself? Like, I don't have all my fingers. Like, am I actually going to be able to do this? Like, there's just so much that I had to process through. And it, like, what if I can't open the, bottle? What if I can't, all these things. But
it seems like you figured it out.
Yeah, they come, and you know what? You figure it out. And it's just like the recovery coming home from the hospital. I did years of PT, OT, ST, all the things. And, I could imagine that I could have a quality of life that was so good. Back then, I could have never imagined that my life would be, where it is right now. And that's something that, I talk about on social media all the time, is those times laying in the hospital when I was alone and, in the dark and couldn't talk because I had a trach, and, nobody could stay because it was the ICU. So people couldn't stay overnight and, tied down in every way. I could have never, ever imagined that just 5 years later, my life could be so full and so beautiful and just, overrun with blessings. And it's the same way, having Levi. Like, I was so terrified when I was pregnant. Like, I just don't think I can do this. Like, I just don't think I can physically do that, but he's here and we're doing it, and things are messy sometimes. He easily knocks the bottle out of my hand because I don't have very much finger to hold on to it with. So, we spill milk a lot and we drop stuff all the time. And so there's more messes to clean up. But you know what?
You figure it out.
It's life. You figure it out and it's beautiful. And
I don't have a burn injury of that nature, but there, were times even just early on, I think that's a thing as a mom, right? I don't even think that's necessarily just because you have a burn injury. I think other moms can relate to, like,
I'm sure
the first time you leave the house with him alone, or like the first time your husband leaves and you're like, now what? Right? Like, there are days where I'm like, okay, I have to shower, or, oh, I need to use the restroom. Like, what am I going to do with him? Right. And we adapted real quick of like, there are bouncers are my best friend. I've made
100%.
Yep.
Bouncer in the bathroom. That's it.
Bouncer in the bathroom. The Bjorn bouncer is my best friend. We have little, like, play pens all over the house because you have to gate off those unsafe areas.
I'm sure that's what's next for us. He's not crawling yet, but he's really, really close. And so
you'll get there.
Sure the gated community is next.
Yeah, I'm telling you, the second that he started, like, or I don't even know if it's the crawling as much as like the being able to pull himself up onto things that we were like, and fiddling with everything. It was like, okay. And we did do the playpen for a bit, and then the playpen became too like confined for him and he wanted space. So then it was like, okay, the gates. So most people would think we have gates in our house because we have a dog. No, the dog and the baby are in the same space, but like gated off from like the trouble areas of the house.
Right.
The kitchen being one of them. Like, I've heard too many burn injury stories about the dangers of the kitchen and the things that they can get into. Yes, so the kitchen is a big no-no in our family. The office where I'm sitting right now, there's too many like technology things that he can pull and wires he can get in trouble with. So the gates are a fun spot. So you're at the stage where you're like, okay, I can still put him down and walk slightly away for a second, and he's not going to do anything crazy.
We know our days are limited with that.
Trust me. Yeah. Enjoy them now, Medley, because as soon as my husband said to me the other day, he looked at me and he was like, I think I took that time for granted, because now you turn around and you're like, where did he go? What did he do?
I know. So, we know it's coming. We know it's coming. So yes, we are savoring that, being able to put him on his mat and walk away. And he can't get very far. He can move a little bit, but just however far he can roll or spin himself around or, go back. He's going every direction but forwards.
And it took my son a while. Like, I don't know if this is a boy thing or whatnot, but it took my son a while to be able to push up on his hand. He army crawled everywhere for a long time. And it was actually harder, right? Like, we were like, this is hard for you to do, but he would army crawl everywhere, and it was so cute to see him do it. But once he got on those hands and knees, like, I think he can crawl faster than he can step now. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's wild. They change so much, like, every day. It's really just like, slow down.
And if you don't mind me asking and sharing, let's talk a little bit about your pregnancy, because I think the fears that you had are also, I've heard them in the community as well. So if you don't mind me asking, your grafts, are they on your stomach region, or were those where did they take skin from anywhere? Like, let's talk a little bit about that.
So my grafts are basically on my arms and legs. So like top top of the shoulder, down past my hands, top of my legs, down. My feet were not grafted because they did wind up healing on their own, but like top of the leg to, past the ankle. So that's where all my grafts are my arms and legs. And I've had like this eyelid grafted, and some other like little spots, but for the most part, my trunk healed on its own, which was amazing. And something that I'm so thankful for. So I have like a lot of scarring on my sides and on my back, but honestly, my stomach is pretty unscarred, which is miraculous. Just seeing how everything, went. Because 4% is not a lot left untouched. But I am thankful for the 4% that was left untouched. So my stomach was burned. All of that was burned, but my stomach healed really well. And so it actually probably has the least amount of scarring for the areas that were burned. Like my back was burned and healed on its own, but it is very scarred. So I am thankful for that because, grafts on the arms and legs, can deal with that. And so thankfully I didn't have any trouble with my stomach growing, and thank God, because he was 9 pounds and 12 ounces when he was born.
Oh, wow. That is a big baby, my friend.
He shocked us all. Nobody thought that he was going to be that big because I just didn't look that big. Like I just really didn't. So very thankful for that. But I do still struggle with nerve pain in my feet, and I have swelling in my left foot every single day because my left leg was burned a lot worse than my right leg. And so my left leg actually doesn't have hardly any adipose tissue. Like they had to cut it down so much that it's basically just the muscle and the fascia. And so my legs are different sizes, which, body image is a whole nother topic, but so my left leg was burned. Really, my left side was burned worse than my right side. And so anyways, I have swelling that I deal with in that left ankle every single day. And it's just a part of life. I sleep with my legs elevated and it goes down and we get up and we do it again. And it's just, it's one of those things that just becomes a part of your normal life as a burn survivor. And so I was really worried about, things like that. Cause, even normal people in pregnancy, they swell, their feet swell. And so I was really concerned about a lot of those like normal things. And then in addition with the burn injury, just like, can my body do it? And the fact that we get so overheated so easily, it's so easy for me to pass out. Like, and I live in South Louisiana, not a good place for it.
I was going to ask, I heard really a little bit of the South, but you're near me with Florida and tell you the heat some days will get you. That's rough when you least expect it.
I know. And, at this point, I feel like I'm pretty well versed, my husband and I plan well, we have the water, we have the body armor, we have all the things.
The body armor saved me through my whole pregnancy and just even and beyond.
I have been doing body armor basically since I got out of the hospital. And
I swear by it.
Kevin's you should be sponsored by them by how much we buy it. I'm like, I know.
Yes. We always try to find the deals, right? I think you're in a Publix region, but anytime there's like sales or anything in Costco, the body armor, especially my husband found it actually. I was going to be breastfeeding and he was like, I saw this video of the blue body armor being like the mom's like godsend, and I was like, it tastes pretty good. And so, I started with that, but I have, our fridge is stocked with all the body armor. It does work, I believe. And I think when you're hot and sweating or not sweating, right. In some cases.
Exactly. Not sweating.
Yeah. It one of them and I'll be back to normal. Like, I feel like it gets me back to where I need to be. So
I can't take credit for it. My PT back in 2020, he was the one that was like, maybe you should try Body Armor. It's got more vitamins and minerals than standard, other stuff. And so that's kind of how we got started on it. And it's worked good. So I've never done anything else. But yeah.
Do you have a favorite flavor
was,
of Body Armor?
I like them all, actually. I'm really not picky. I don't like the orange one, but that's because I don't like orange. So other than that, I'll pretty much drink any of them.
I like the fruit punch is my favorite. And the black one, I don't know what flavor it is. It's a weird berry.
Blackout berry.
Blackout berry, I think. And those are my go-tos when I'm like, especially on a hot day. Let me tell you, it is. So it's funny that you are also, it was my mom drink of choice for a while. So, yeah, good. Especially when you're hot. You've never tried it?
No, I've tried it like once, but I'll remember that one day if I become a mom to make sure I stock up on Body Armor before.
Well, supposedly it was supposed to increase your supply, and everyone's always like, "Does it work?" I'm like, "Well, let me tell you, it didn't decrease my supply." So,
yeah,
I will.
I heard a lot of people say that. So. And I was like, well, that works because I already drink it for being a burn survivor. So I already drink it for other reasons. So,
and I will tell you, like hot yoga, I go to hot yoga a couple times, like, at least try to once a week. I try to go. And if you go to hot yoga, you sweat an increased amount, or if I'm outside, I sweat a lot. And I've noticed like my supply will go up and down based on how sweaty and how hot, especially in hot yoga. So to prepare, I always drink one before and one after. And that usually but I can tell if I haven't had enough, I usually have to have a Body Armor. And I will tell you, like, it's a secret sauce. So if there's any, research study folks listening to,
I know
it is worth a shot
to
see how it works. Cause I will say, like, I've seen it work. So
yeah, because the amount of times that I have passed out from being overheated since coming home from the hospital, it's an astronomical number.
That's crazy.
So
yeah,
it works. It helps because,
and I'm sure
I haven't passed out in a long time. Yeah,
you haven't.
I haven't in a long time. So,
and
it's been the Body Armor.
Body Armor. I think overall we're just better prepared. You kind of learn. When like, okay, this is the point where we're about to reach no return. And so we need to like back it up. And, we just try to plan.
I can feel it on myself if I'm getting too hot. And I'm sure you probably that I don't like that feeling of passing out. Let me tell you, it is not a good feeling. But I can feel like that wave and either like, okay, I need to go inside. I also get I would call it like the pins and needles feeling when I'm too hot outside. Like if I start getting that, that's like my body's way of saying like, hey, you need to go cool off for a minute. And so, but yeah, I think being a mom and being pregnant adds to that. So yeah, the Body Armor, we're going to be sponsored by Body Armor pretty soon here with all the talk of it. So
come on,
right?
Sponsor us, please.
Please. Well, I know we're coming up on time here in a little bit, but before we do, I do want to stop and Rachel touched on it a little bit. You talk a lot about your speaking opportunities, but also your faith. And so I know you're very involved in your church, correct? But also you do go speak at other churches and whatnot. So you want to talk a little bit about your faith and maybe what you and your husband are doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we were in the midst of recovery, everything was up in the air. Like, does he go back to medical school? Like, what happens with that? It was all just chaos. And so to make a very long story short and several years condensed into just a very short, we talked and, we prayed and we sought mentors in our life and, different things. And, my husband ultimately made the decision to not go back to medical school, which was a huge thing for him because he had come so far and he had done so much. But he would have had 2 more years of medical school and then he would have had residency. And the max amount of time that he was given was, they gave him a 2-year leave of absence, which was wonderful, because we didn't even know if they would give him that. And so, but even at that point, even 2 years after, like, life was still really hard for me. Um, and he just did not feel like it was the right thing to leave me. We could have paid for somebody to come and be with me. And I told him, I'm like, you have to make this decision because I don't want to make it. And whatever you decide is fine. And I genuinely meant that because we had both put blood, sweat, and tears into his medical school journey, because he and I had been together all that time. So I knew it was a big thing. And so he decided to just walk away from it. And we didn't really know what would come next, but we know that it was the right decision. And, so many doors have opened for us since then that just honestly fell into our laps. I mean, there's no other way to say it. Um, our social media page, my social media page taking off in the way that it did. Like, I wasn't trying to do that. Um, and it started out of my sister actually trying to just keep people updated with how my recovery was going when I was in the hospital. That's actually how it started. And it was months and months and months before I personally ever posted anything. And it kind of just took off from there. And I wasn't looking for that. I wasn't expecting anything out of that. I didn't even really know like what influencers were at the time. And so that kind of took off, and honestly, from that and from just our faith community that spread out, all over the country, it's given us a lot of opportunities. We've done podcasts, and we've traveled all over the United States. We speak at churches, we speak at conferences, we've spoken at community events, and that's pretty much honestly what we do. And we could have never imagined this life that we would have been given. And but we enjoy it, and we love getting to share our story and connect with people. And it's a constant reminder to us that even the worst things in life, they can turn into something so beautiful. And so just, we could have never imagined that this is how our story would have gone, and that's something I talk about all the time on social media. It's I could have never ever imagined that this is where life would be. We didn't seek it out, but we know that we're doing what we were meant to do. And we love getting to travel and speak and connect with people. And for strangers to just come up to us in public, it happens all the time, just randomly, and to just feel like a connection, and to be able to feel that they can share their story, whatever it is, burn or not burn. Trauma is kind of the same, and pain is kind of the same. And for people to feel that connection with us just because they relate to something that we've been willing to share with the world is just it's so humbling, for people to just walk up and share an intimate part of their life with you, a stranger, because they feel like they know you and they connect with you. It's just so humbling. It's just
Mhm.
it's the most humbling thing, that we feel like that people invite us into that space, to invite us into that intimate circle and share their stories with us. And um, it's really amazing. It's just given us so many opportunities, and it's given us so many friends, and just our community has just expanded so much, and we feel just so incredibly blessed to get to do this. And we don't know what all the future holds. We've been asked many, many times, is there a book in the future? And maybe there is. That seems like a really daunting task, though, to just sit down and write a book.
Mhm.
But probably something that we will do at some point. But yeah,
That's
that's
awesome.
pretty much what we're doing. Traveling,
That's
speaking,
that's awesome.
adjusting to being parents, and taking life as it comes.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely a firm believer, and I'm sure you are too, that everything happens for a reason, and you might not be able to see that reason right away, but it's amazing,
Absolutely.
how far you've come. And writing a book is definitely daunting. I've never done it, but lots of survivors in our community have, but it's also amazing to look back at it too. Not only for you, but for others who can read it and really see your whole journey.
I know. And that's something that my husband and I talk about, as we get farther away from it. It's almost like, like I was talking about earlier, you kind of start to forget some of those details and some of those things. And so we talk about it sometimes from the aspect of, honestly, we really just need to write a book for us.
Hmm.
Because if we don't sit down and write it, we're going to forget. And we need record of all of those things, all of those days that we thought like, this
Mm.
is never this is never going to get better. Our marriage is always going to be terrible. It's, we're never going to not fight. And, because we went through some really rough on our marriage too. And,
Mm.
we both went through counseling together and separately, and we did all the things and the PT and the OT and every type of thing we had it. And, we're in a beautiful place now, and we honestly can't imagine had we not gone through that where
Hmm.
we would be, because we're so
Mm.
strong and solid now. We're like,
Mm.
it doesn't matter what comes, like we have got each other's back.
Mm.
And so sometimes we look back at that and we're like, man, if we hadn't gone through that,
Mm.
where would our marriage be today?
Hmm.
Because
Mm.
that really, I mean, you go through something like that and you have to get down to the bedrock of who you are as a person,
Mm.
who they are as a person, your
Mm.
strengths, your weaknesses, your preconceptions, your perspective, because you can only see things the way that they are for you. And, learning communication and, all that. It forced us. It was like a focus group, right? Like
Right.
you have got to figure this out or y'all are going to go your separate ways. And
Mm.
that is really what it came down to. And
Mm.
so we fought through that. We fought for our marriage, and it's just a
Yeah.
beautiful life that God's given us, and we feel so blessed. And so, yeah, writing a book is scary. Maybe we'll do it. We need to do it, even if it's just for us. But
Yeah, just like a journal. Doesn't even have to
yeah,
be a book.
Right.
exactly.
There's so much about, I think two things there here, right? I hear like as an influencer, I think, or right, if we want to call it that, right? As an influencer or someone on social media, we often put out there the things that are like the best in our lives. And we don't really realize like there are some really hard times that we have to go through. And whether I see it visually, right? I know I did post a lot of my journey as well. I think that's what people also resonate with is like trauma is really hard and going through tough times. So sometimes like we don't always see those things, but even when we do see the hard things, we don't see everything, right? So like marriage, like getting through some of the really tough stuff, right? I took a vow that I would see you through all of the things, but like
Right.
until you're actually in the middle of it, you're like,
Right.
this is what it means, right? Like this
Right.
is the really, really hard things that I don't always
Yes.
get to see on the, I see the surface level things with stuff, but like until you're actually thrown in it. And I think that's what makes my bond with my husband so special, right? Of like, if we could do that, like he's seen me at my absolute worst, right? And then I'm sure the same is for you and Kevin, right? Like
Absolutely.
he has seen you
Absolutely.
at my worst, right? Like not even being able to go to the bathroom by myself, right? And like those
Yep.
are things that
Absolutely.
you don't want anyone to have to, especially somebody who like you've had that romantic relationship with, to have to
Right.
see. But once you've gotten through that, like
Yep.
everything else is right, like is going to be okay. And I think, yes, there were a lot of horrible things that we had to see each other through, but being able to get on the other side, I think that's really what's helped our marriage. And then, you bring a child and it only makes things amplified. And there are good days and bad days, I'm sure. But we always kind of have to self-reflect of like, okay, we've done way worse. Like we can definitely get through this
We can
difficult moment.
definitely handle this. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. That's
sure.
always
We for sure
and I
feel
think
that
the
way.
faith. Yep. The faith is what gets you through. It's like, okay, I was able to get through this. I know we can get through the next thing together for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For sure.
Well, I know we are coming up on time, and we've only scratched the surface of things I'm sure that we could talk about. And maybe the next time we'll have Kevin join us as well, because I know it has been so fun to learn about you. But I think we also I know my husband probably also has a lot in common with Kevin of going through something very similar. A lot of what you're saying is resonating so much, but we always ask our guests 2 final questions. And so today's final question for me is like, what is one thing as a burn survivor, or maybe as a burn survivor and a mom, that you would want the world to know about you and your journey?
I would say learning to be authentic in every season that you're in is so important. It's important to you, like you as the person. It's important to me to be authentic to myself. And it's so important for me to be authentic to all the people around me. It doesn't mean that we have to be negative. Like, doesn't mean that we have to walk around to be negative all the time. But it just means that we reflect everything, right? We reflect the positive and the negative, because life is full of both. And we have good days and we have bad days. And I think it's, for me in this journey and what I've put on social media, I think what's resonated most with people is just that I have tried to always be authentic. I'm not going to get on social media and be like, every day is a win, every day is awesome, because it's not. It's not. And there are extremely hard times. And it doesn't mean I'm going to get on there and just like go on a tirade or whatever. But just showing people on social media, showing people in real life, like, we can be authentic, and we have to learn to sit in our own feelings sometimes. And we have to learn how to process through that. And it's okay. The way that we're going to bring people along and to show people how they can get through their trauma and how they can get through their pain is to just show up and be authentic and be like, I know this is the hardest thing that you've ever done, but we're here, whatever you need, and you can get through this. And it's okay to feel this way, and it's okay to feel this way, because those feelings won't last forever, and tomorrow will come and it'll be a different feeling, and it'll be better. And then you might have a bad day, but you're going to have good day. Your good days should outweigh your bad days, but life is full of both. And so just learning to embrace life and just be authentic and be real and be transparent. I think that's really my biggest thing. Is I've always tried to be really transparent with people and be like, it was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I did it, and you can do it too. Whatever it is that you're going through, it's possible to get through anything.
It truly, truly is. Well, thanks for sharing that. But it is time for our final question, which today is our Phoenix Partner question, sponsored by Exerco Medical, an organization that continues to redefine excision science with its innovative skin recovery products. So their question is, what is one word you would use to describe the burn community?
Resilient.
I love it.
It's a really good one, especially with the theme of our episode today. You've definitely shown quite some resilience here and continue to do so. So we really, really appreciate you being here. It was a pleasure to actually get to connect with you. I've followed your journey for quite some time, and we do have so much in common. But if you're interested in following your journey, we will make sure that we put your Instagram in our show notes, give you a follow, because I know our community, especially, I know I've had this conversation with quite a few survivors, being a mom and being a burn survivor is a unique thing. Yeah. And so it's always nice to connect with other moms, and excited to see where your journey goes, especially with baby Levi now as well.
Yes, it's a whole new journey.
Awesome. Well, it was a pleasure to have you on the show.
Yes, thank you all so much for having me.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It was
We'll
my
definitely have
pleasure,
to.
really.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to have you and Kevin on again, maybe next season.
We would
to
love
talk
that.
about-
Yeah, that would be fun.
Awesome. Well, it was a pleasure as always, and we thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, thank y'all so much. Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Girls with Grafts. If you are enjoying this content, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.